Murray Taggart and his son run a mixed farming operation of sheep, cattle and crops in North Canterbury. A portion of the property is irrigated from the Waimakariri irrigation scheme that Murray's father helped set up in the 1990s. Murray went into banking after studying at Lincoln. He then returned to the family farm and was a Nuffield scholar before a time as the meat and fibre chairman of Federated Farmers. Currently he's chairman of Alliance Group, the farmer-owned meat processing and exporting cooperative.
Alliance, I'm chairman of the company. We have 9 directors, there's 6 farmer directors and 3 outside appointed directors for their commercial expertise, and the board elects one person to be their chairman, and that happens to be me at the moment. I've always had a philosophy, I guess, that you need to contribute to your community outside the farm gate, and everyone has different things they're good at. Some people are good at coaching the rugby team, some are good at the St John's. My strength, I guess, given my commercial background in the bank, was to get involved in off-farm activity, such as I was involved in Federated Farmers and then moved through into the more commercial roles. The biggest impact is that you're not there on the farm. Things happen that perhaps if you'd been home they wouldn't have happened. But you do start to realise that just because the people that are working with you don't necessarily take the same pathway you did, they still end up pretty much at the same place. You learn to trust the people that are working for you to do the job and come up with a solution, and they grow an arm and a leg as well. And you've got to develop very good relationships with the people that service the business, because you're not there, so you're relying on other people to pick up that support. And certainly we have great relationships with the people we deal with, whether it's farmlands or our local transport operator or our spray operator. They're all key to getting the business to run. We're predominantly arable, about 35 sheep, 15 beef. We're currently 666 hectares. We own some and lease other bits off family members. My parents bought the original block in 1958. Personal involvement, grew up here and then went to university and then worked for ANZ Bank for 7 years. Always wanted to go farming but didn't have any money, and eventually got to the point where we could afford to buy in here. It's like anywhere in Canterbury, the more irrigation water the better. We need more water and haven't got enough. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, the land is in quite small blocks, and we've managed to accumulate various blocks over time, but they're not all in contiguous blocks, so we're having to traverse state highways and roads that used to be rural roads but now have a lot of urban traffic on them. We're surrounded by lifestyle blocks here. Most of the lifestyle blocks share our desires for the countryside, but some of them haven't made the transition to realising they're living in the country. Water's the number one issue. We were dryland farmers up until 1999, and when you're a dryland farmer, you're farming with your foot on the brake all the time because you're worried about it being a drought tomorrow. Once we've got water, you can farm with your foot on the accelerator, and that's enabled us to grow the business and given us opportunities which we would never have got otherwise. I think succession planning is a challenge for every farming family because the numbers are becoming so enormous in terms of how does the next generation buy in on commercial terms, and that's a challenge we're grappling with. And of course you've got to be as fair as possible amongst your family members, and that is a real challenge. Roscoe, our son's just in the last 15 months or so, he's come back into the business, and given that I'm away, I guess averages about a couple of weeks a month, he's very much running the day-to-day operations, which has taken a huge load off me.
At peak we run close to 500 cattle. At the moment we're probably down to just over 400, I think. We've got 1,800 breeding ewes this year, and we're in about 600 or 700 lambs as well, with 500 replacement hoggets. We're about 60% crop. We do try and do as many vegetable seeds, that kind of thing as we can. Obviously we do the cereals, that kind of thing as well. Grass seed, white clover, and just basically anything that fits in the rotation. We're only about a week away from lambing at this point. We're sort of in the middle of everything. In about a week or two's time we'll start clearing everything up for spring crop. We've got, as I say, 1,800 breeding ewes probably starting to lamb in the next wee while. We'd like to get some cattle away at some point as well, and just ease up on feed a wee bit. Having irrigation, it's a very big part of what we do here. You know, the ability to make money off the land is just, it's almost doubled by having irrigation. It really is that, that defining factor of the farm.
We did a conversion on this block 2 years ago. We bought a dairy farm and put sheep and beef on it. We see it as the start of a trend. We find it a bit disappointing that people say, oh, the dairy sector's in a terrible state and the sheep industry's not much better. Well, sheep's only come off 10% and beef's on a high, so compared to the dairy, we think it's actually in a reasonably good space. And the issue you have with the sheep and beef sector is when there's a drought, everyone kills and drops more product on the market, which depresses the price. In dairy, when there's a drought, production slows, and so it drops less product on the market. So considering we've had Australian drought, New Zealand drought, and some other factors around the world that have increased supply in some of our markets, to be hanging in where we have is actually quite encouraging. Looking forward, you then got the exchange rate falling, this tightening of supply. We feel cautiously optimistic. There's certainly been some enthusiasm over the years to try and create a Fonterra-type model or a version of it in the meat industry. The dairy downturn is highlighting that it isn't actually the industry structure that's been driving the dairy returns, it's international supply and demand. And so we would imagine more and more sheep and beef farmers are going to recognise that the performance of their meat company is actually heavily dependent on international supply and demand as well. And any structural change in the industry isn't necessarily going to change that dynamic. I think the other thing too, people focus on the price at the farm gate and need to recognise what is the thing that makes dairy a more competitive land use than sheep and beef. It's essentially how many kilograms of product per hectare are being produced. You take the Southern Plains, you've got your average sheep farmer producing about 270 kilograms per hectare of product, your dairy farmer producing 1,000. So it's not rocket science as to why land would move over time to that more intensive land use.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.